Hello and welcome back to the Superhuman Podcast, the world's first ever health tech podcast. I'm your host, Marty Hendricks, and today I have the immense privilege and honor of hosting two truly remarkable guests, Sara Farwell and Dr. Maciej Zatoski. Sara and Maciej are not your ordinary professionals. They are neuroscience geniuses who have completely transformed how people achieve peak performance, health, and deep fulfillment. Sara is an extraordinary expert who wonderfully combines her pharmaceutical industry leadership, deep scientific knowledge, elite fitness coaching, and empathetic approach to truly change lives. Dr. Maciej is a globally recognized physician and cognitive performance specialist known for his groundbreaking contributions in sleep science, disease prevention, leadership, resilience, and cognitive health. And together, they've created the groundbreaking MIND method, which is actually an acronym. So we'll get into that later and what that stands for. It's a powerful neuroscience-based approach that's absolutely genius, and it's helping countless individuals reclaim control over their minds, their lives, and their futures. I saw the testimonies on your guys' website, and it's really incredible what you guys are doing. It's really important work, especially with technology. I feel like, taking our minds all types of places and the
Mhm.
distractions and mental problems. I'm in America, everyone's obese. It's a big problem. So
Mhm.
helping people claim their habits and in their minds. So I've never been more excited to dive into a conversation. Sara and Maciej, welcome to the show. Did I miss anything on your guys' background? I read your guys' LinkedIn like twice, so I didn't want to get anything wrong.
No, thank you, Marty. That's a very kind introduction. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's very accurate.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so Maciek's calling in from London. Sara, where are you calling in from?
Yes, I'm in the Pennsylvania. I'm closer to you, Marty.
All right, yeah, I'm in Chicago right now.
Okay, great.
All right, so everyone is probably wondering, what is the MIND method? What does that stand for? And what could you walk us through those four stages?
Sure, happy to. So first, every anything that Maciek and I believe that no matter what kind of goal you're working towards, professional, personal, something small, something big, long term, short term, it all begins with the brain. So our approach to helping people is cognitive performance, but really just boiling it down to the brain basics because no one really teaches you how your brain actually works. And we're not talking about all the, details of neuroscience at the molecular level, unless you're interested in it like we are. But just, how does it really work? Why do we have the thoughts we have? How can we change these patterns of things? How do they get there in the first place? And then how do we use them to our advantage so that we can actually move ourselves forward? And so we do everything from the brain again, regardless of whether you're trying to work on something at work,
Mhm.
work on something physical, doesn't matter. We kind of approach it from that point.
Mhm.
And in order for someone to know where they're going, first we need to know where we are. And so our what we're calling our mind method starts with self-awareness, self-acceptance, and just a deeper understanding of yourself. And the M stands for mirror. That's where we start. It's a mirror because, and people use this word now, I think, more frequently, but when we say that, we really mean taking a really good look at yourself, and we can help do that. But what are your preferences? What thoughts do you have? What are your patterns? And not necessarily to dig into the past, it's really just to know where you are right now. Um, and so that's where it starts broadly, is with this mirroring phase. That's M. Macho, do you want to take I?
I'm more than happy to take the eye. So as Sarah has outlined, we start with hanging a mirror in front of someone else's face and help people to see themselves. And you probably wouldn't be surprised to hear that most people haven't really met themselves. They typically live a life hiding behind a certain mask or behind a certain face or appearances that they have learned to create or create for themselves very early on. And our society doesn't really help to dig a little bit more deeper into who we truly are as humans. Because we want to be good, we want to be nice. There's also a nasty side to all of us. So we believe that the fundamental thing is to dig it out so that you can face yourself, to truly understand yourself first. And once we do this, we move to the ignite phase of our method. And I think it's important to say here that the things that we do and the way we work with individuals, our method combines multiple elements from multiple different systems. It combines cognitive conditioning, latest behavioral science, but we also dig into things that people have discovered a long time ago in different cultures, different philosophical systems, different religions, different practices, provided that they work in practice. So our method is in a way amalgamation of things that have been tried and tested and are proven to work when it comes to changing behavior, changing habits, and making the most out of the most important organ that you have. So when it comes to your ignite elements of the mind method, this is where you already know yourself, or you are able to look at yourself with a lens of the objective reality. So you really know who you are, and we are starting to prompt your brain to start thinking and looking at the world in a way it really is, not in a way you want it to be, or not in a way it appears to you through the lens of your experiences, of your perspectives. And seeing the world for what it is, again, it's a second element that people are often surprised by, because we filter what we see with our brains. We don't see with our eyes, we don't hear with our ears. We process that information in our brains. And we need to learn to untangle what our brain does to the information that we're receiving and how we're filtering it to see it for what it is. Now, this allows us to start behaving in a different way, and it allows us to start making meaningful changes, breaking old habits, and allow us to focus on what really matters to us, right? So we start with yourself, and then we expand that self-awareness and that objective view of yourself to more objective view at the surrounding reality. And we call this the ignite phase.
Mm-hmm. Now, anytime we change a habit or learn something new, it takes practice. And so the N is what we call nurture. And some of that is to nurture the new habits that you're practicing, some of the rewriting. Sometimes you have to go back and start over and try something else. So there's a little bit of self-care here, and again, acceptance, and it doesn't always work for you the first time, or your brain. It takes some time. So we're nurturing ourselves holistically speaking, but we're also nurturing the essentially the neuroplasticity that we're trying to really expand as we move through these phases, through this practice, through learning, not just learning new behaviors, but sometimes people need to make much bigger changes, maybe a change to their environment, change in their relationships. There could be a lot of different things that takes time and intention in this phase. And so it kind of builds on the previous two. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, sort of maybe thinking about why that is intuitive, and maybe some of the changes that you've made in your life in a similar way.
Yes, and it's the goal of this phase is to start creating a habits that will be lasting. I think a good example, how do we describe it in a way that it's accessible? For example, a lot of our clients initially when they come to us, they come with very simple problems. Oh, let's say I want to lose weight, right? And when we dig deeper and discover what really happened in the past, turns out they've done it many times, right? We are not the people to help you lose weight. We are the people that help you keep it, right? We want you to, our goal is to start creating habits and create an environment for you, both internally and externally, that allows you to achieve anything you want if you put the right work in. So this is the phase. We need to go to the previous phases before we can start forming these habits. Because if the previous two steps wouldn't happen, those habits will not be lasting.
Yeah.
I think, and that is, I believe, what everyone can relatively easily relate to, right? A lot of us have tried something, but then we lapse back into the previous patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a significant amount of work that needs to happen before, and that combines education and experience and learning before you can start creating and building habits, recognizing certain behavioral patterns, and overriding them on a cellular level. It essentially means creating new neural pathways so that the new behaviors and new habits and new scripts will work for you in the long term, right? Yeah.
And then why don't you take the last phase?
Yeah, and then we move to the development phase, which is this is the most advanced part, and it builds strongly on everything of all the work that you must have you've put in before we get to that stage. And this is the phase where you solidify your new identity, your new habits, but we also help people expand their cognitive reserves, increase their cognitive agility, help with their discipline, with mental, physical strength, all the things that make you not just create and establish the habits that you have, that allow you to get the most out of the brain that you have. And this is, again, that's important because essentially everything that happens to you in life depends on what you carry behind your eyes.
That's right.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I think that reminds me of a good. I've been reading the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. It's like life is just a series of sensory experiences, and then you determine how to perceive that. So it really does all start and end with the brain, the central nervous system, which is why I think your work is probably very impactful because it pervades through all the aspects of someone's life because everything starts with uh, the brain, no?
That's right.
Yeah, so okay, how did you guys come up with this thing? You guys it's just you're like
Great question.
you're like Newton and you're just sitting under a tree and then it just
I wish.
happens and then yeah,
Well, I wish that was
how did
that
you
simple.
guys formulate this mind method?
Where do we start? God, where do we start? So we together I've been obsessed about the brain for years, and I think so was Sara. And this is a combination of what combined 30 years of experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, countless books, countless philosophies, countless religions, countless practices, right? From meditation through prayer, which we now have neuroscientific equivalents for, right? Sara, you're about to start another course in neuroscience as well.
And
Right. So we continue learning, continue exploring. Then we rooted back into behavioral science. We looked at the psychology, picked up what worked, right? As a consequence of this, in the last years, I even committed a book on all the things that don't work in psychology and in cognitive behavioral therapy, right? But we've taken the elements that are impactful, that are quick to apply, and that are guaranteed to work from multiple things, whether they regardless of where they originate from, as long as they have been proven to be effective.
yeah,
And we put all these things together. That's it.
yeah, and we know they're effective because we've done them ourselves. And in between our professional and personal experiences, we've worked with people in different ways. I have an academic background. We both have corporate background, and that's great. I've worked with clients in many different health facilities. So we've sort of independently put these together. Maciej has practiced in private practice, and he was a surgeon previously. So we just put our philosophies together based on all of the evidence that we've generated over the last decades on our own.
Mm-hmm.
And we're constantly refining this too. And And
Mhm.
but this is where we start with
Yes.
what we work with now.
And so, yes, because I've been obsessed with cognitive performance, right? How do you make people smarter? How do you make better decisions, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's in business or in your personal life. Because you just think about this, even if you make a tiny improvement, if you make 5% better decisions than your competitor,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
like 5 years down the line, you're outperforming them by a mile, right? They won't
Yes.
be able to catch up, right? Those things accumulate over time.
Mhm.
And the other thing I was always obsessed about, relatively early on, was disease prevention, right? As Sara said, I started as a surgeon. I used to be a head and neck surgeon, specializing in head and neck oncology as well. And one thing I have realized relatively early on, that a lot of things that we do as a society is just we look at symptoms, right? Doctors look at symptoms. Pharmaceutical companies produce medicines that manage symptoms, but cures are hardly any, right, available there. And a lot of things in head and neck oncology is similar, right? We remove the symptom, we cut out the growth, but we rarely look at what caused it, right?
Mhm.
90% or more of laryngeal cancers are tobacco related.
Hmm.
You can continue developing better surgical techniques for as long as you like, but you can also prevent it, right? A lot of things that are happening to us can be stopped. And then this obsession with prevention rather than treatments was something that grew on me for a long time. Again, I've been doing this from the very early stages of my career. It's just so much better not to let those things happen. And then I look at the mortality and morbidity statistics. Cardiovascular disease, cancers,
Mhm.
neurodegenerative conditions, which is everything to do with cognition, and accidents. If you will die, it will be of one of those four things, and all of them are preventable.
Mhm.
Now, the other thing is, at some point in life, I have bumped into Sara. We've met, so we worked at the same vaccine manufacturer. So again, preventive health, a small American biotech at that time. And my approach was starting from the brain's point of view. Sara's was from the body point of view.
Yeah.
And one word to another, it turns out that the things that we have discovered, developed, came across, they're very complementary, because we know what's good for your body is good for the brain, and
Mhm.
vice versa. And one conversation to another, started discovering, listen, I've reached the same conclusions working on the different end of the body, let's say, right? I work with physical, but these are my learnings. I worked on the brain. This is what I have learned. And putting those things together, we ended up with a very powerful system that allows you to achieve whatever you want to achieve in life. You just need to put in a little bit of the work, right? We are the guides. We can help people, and those who are willing to put in the effort, they see fantastic outcomes out of it.
Yeah,
And
I
we're not
mean,
the first, right? We're not the first. We're not claiming to be the first, right? There's many people before us, thousands of years ago sometimes, who discovered certain principles that still work together. You can go back to the ancient texts, Roman texts. You can look at the Stoic philosophies. You can look at multiple systems, right? Meditation as a practice. No matter where you look around the world, people have discovered many things about themselves throughout thousands of years.
Right.
And a lot of them are, sometimes there are a lot of, how to use a scientific term, bullshit. I hope it's okay to use that word on your podcast.
oh yeah,
Around the things that work. But what we try to do is we essentially remove the things that are ideological or not necessary, and pick the bits that actually work and are rooted in evidence, put them together, create one powerful system.
yeah, definitely. I think that like the newer stuff is the more untested stuff, and sometimes we have recency bias. But I think what has lasted a year will probably last one more year, and the things
Mhm.
that have lasted 1,000 years will probably last another 1,000 years.
Exactly.
And it's kind of interesting how texts on the human condition have resonated like thousands of years, despite all the changes, and throughout different geographies, people resonate with the same texts, mythology, stories. It has to say something about the human condition and the human mind, right?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
you just said it, that all the changes aren't actually to the human. It's around, it's what's around the human, right? The brain really hasn't evolved that much. It's just completely overloaded, distracted. It's not meant for the environment. It doesn't function, it's not meant to function in the environment that we find ourselves in now.
Yeah, well, we can make it work in the environment that we are in. We just need to understand both the brain and the environment,
Yes.
right? So
Mhm.
I think for our listeners, a great thing to be aware of is that an average person today, an average person receives more information during every week of their life than an average person in the 15th century received throughout the duration of their lifetime, right? But our brains are fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
Right? Just think about this. Just think about the amount of noise that your brain is exposed to and needs to deal with. Right? And people start to recognize information overload as symptoms, right? They think, oh, I must have this disease. I feel this, therefore I must have whatever the common word is today, anxiety. So I need to go to the doctor and get a pill. And they will be prescribed with a medicine that will dampen the symptoms, right? Oh, I must have this condition. I must have attention deficit. I must be depressed because I felt sad 2 days, in a row, and no one on my Instagram scroll feed feels or felt sad today, and so on and so on. And those things start to accumulate.
Mhm.
You don't see this every day, but keep doing this for a week, a month, a year, or a 10. No wonder we live in a time described as the largest mental health or mental well-being epidemic in the history of humankind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I a lot because I feel like a lot of people speak as though people have always had mental health problems and we've just changed the stigma about it. Now you can be more open about having depression or anxiety, but I don't know. I have to say that I agree more so with you that the unnatural conditions are making us develop unnatural states of being. Um, because I mean, I think we all remember times maybe as a child or something. We're at like camp and it's just us in nature and we feel completely, you can say at peace, you can say in somewhat of a zone state. And
Mhm.
perhaps that's what most humans, despite the disease, etc.,
Mm,
you know, without the information overload, at least they had some type of stable state of
mm.
being in their head and how they perceive things. They didn't have the same information overload, and that's why we have this explosion of ADHD and anxiety, depression, etc. So I gotta say, I think I agree. Um, you know, unnatural environment, unnatural brain state.
I think there's probably a combination of if you're treating, if your brain is, let's say, like a really high-end car, but you're like putting corn oil into it and trying to make it run, like it's not going to happen either. So,
Mm.
and everyone's brains should be treated that way. So I think there's a combination of things here. It's not necessarily that the prevalence of cognitively based cognitive conditions are increasing necessarily. That's also just an output and also a symptom and sometimes misinterpreted too.
Yeah,
But you're right. There's a reason why there's an emphasis, especially now, on not just a connection to nature, but specifically more a disconnection from any other input. And we just happen to have the majority of our daily inputs be technological
Hmm.
that are designed to reinforce dopamine for not that much and attention and taking away all these things. And this has been
Mhm.
going on for decades now.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, and like you said, Marty, there's when if people can put themselves back into nature or ground themselves and allow themselves to kind of observe where they are even then, which is also uncomfortable if you're not practiced. It does feel different. It's not quite, balance and connection. It does allow you to put your brain into a different state where it's not taking all the input in, taking the sounds of the birds, wind of trees, anything you visually see, what you feel, how it smells, do you taste, like all of these kind of really fundamental basic things.
Mhm.
Your brain is only focusing on one thing at a time anyway, even when you're on your phone or even in this conversation, we're all online. If you're significantly decreasing the inputs that are coming in because
Mhm.
you're in nature, automatically these symptoms or feelings of that, the result of those overstimulation, of course, that's going to go away.
Hmm.
Mhm. And
Mhm.
we encourage people to think about attention as a resource, as a currency, as money that they have.
Mhm.
And we live at times where everyone around you competes for your attention, because when they do this, it creates a window where they can try to sell you something or convince you to do something or give you something. And the more time you would have to pause and reflect, the less likely you would be to fall for these things.
Hmm.
But that's the current economy, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes all you need is understanding of how it works.
Yeah.
And Sarah just said that your brain runs on dopamine. They always have, right? And they will. And that's the major driving force for your behavior. And it needs to be like this, right? You need to be rewarded for doing that. That warrants your survival. You need to be able to find food. You need to be able to find shelter. You need to be able to reproduce, right? In order to survive, we need to do this as a species. But dopamine typically is a very difficult thing to obtain. Dopamine in nature, which is this drug, let's say, that forces you to do things or gets you to do things, feel rewarded for achieving something, normally comes after a significant amount of effort that you put in. You needed to hunt, carry the animal home, then skin it, then cook it, and then you would get your dopamine, right? Today you can get a burst of dopamine from this, flip of a finger on a screen of your phone. That's free dopamine for zero effort. Well,
Mhm.
this you can see where this is going, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And so, okay, so I saw in your white paper, 5 to 10, beats per minute drop in heart rate, increases in HRV. So where exactly, and it's obvious that it exists, but where exactly is that connection between these changes in the central nervous system,
Mhm.
and then these physiological real changes? Where does that happen?
Yeah.
Just just to like,
Mhm.
I guess, know
Okay,
it, to think about it within that context, to think about
so
changing my brain within that context.
okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, we're tapping into many different things here, I think, right, Sarah?
That's a great question, though.
Yeah. So where do we start?
Maybe let's start with, by focus. This is why I think we started with, regardless of what your goal is. If you focus on the brain, there's going to be a number of different outcomes potentially for you that range from all of the emotional and cognitive performance aspect, but also move into physical. One of those, depending on how you move, if your movement, just general movement changes, if you adopt exercise habits that we have in our mind method, because there's specific formats of exercise that specifically reinforce brain health, then one of those outcomes, as an example, is a change in heart rate variability that you've mentioned. So maybe you could outline um, maybe yeah, the mechanism behind
Mhm.
HRV specifically, and then we can jump into zone two, I think.
Yes. Okay, let's do this. Okay, because we will be combining here because we have to, right? What is happening, how your mind impacts your body, right? And vice versa. Because again, those systems are connected, right? You're a central nervous system that is riding a skeleton, right? And like bones connected with muscles. That's essentially what we are in a way. And we're regulated through the chemical processes that are happening in our brain, and they're later extended through the neural connections to your body. And what we think impacts what happens to our body, and how we move our body or what we do with our body impacts what we think. So first, let's start with a short demonstration to prove that that's the case. We can put two people on a roller coaster, two friends that will be going on a roller coaster ride. And one person, well, they will both probably experiencing exactly the same physical symptoms, right? Their hands can be cold and sweaty, pounding in the chest, tight stomach, right? Pale face. They will be experiencing this anticipation of what's about to happen. Physically, they will be feeling probably exactly the same sensations. But one person might interpret this as something that's anticipation of fun, as excitement. The other person might experience this as something extremely distressing or even fear-causing and unpleasant. Now, the physical sensations are actually the same, but because you interpret them differently and you respond, your mind interprets them, your brain interprets them differently, what happens subsequently will be a result of what you think and how you interpret those sensations. And that will be dictated by your conscious interpretation of it. Right. So we're moving from what your body feels into what your brain interprets, and later how your body will subsequently respond to this. And here we come to this concept where one person will be clearly distressed and will be probably not willing to repeat that behavior. Another person might finish the ride and say, wow, that was great. I want to do it again. Now, this is not just mindset. There will be different chemicals will be released by the bodies of these people in the way that they interpreted the same situation and the same physical sensations. One will be motivating, fun, and pleasant. The other will be cortisol and adrenaline-induced kind of a fight and flight response, which will start taking a negative toll on your health and on your body. Right? So this is not the environment, not the external events that will shape your response. It's your thinking will shape how your body will respond, what chemicals it will produce, and what will happen subsequently to you. Right? Another good example is when you get a panic attack, right? People sometimes take a bag of a paper bag or a plastic bag, and they try to breathe into the bag because that increases the concentration of carbon dioxide, which will change, or in a consequence, it will change the saturation of your body with oxygen, will increase the concentration of CO2 in your lungs. This will change your breathing rate. It will also increase the pressure that you do and slow down your breathing, which as a consequence will change how you feel, and the panic attack or the fear will go away. Mm-hmm. Right? So here's an example of a very simple and something that people are familiar with intervention, where a physical change to your body changes what you think. Right? And it's a similar thing. We feel different after we exercise. We have better ideas when we walk on a walk, right? Mm-hmm. So this connection between the mind body exists. Now, you've mentioned a parameter, something called HRV, which is, it stands for heart rate variability. And this is a measure of variation in time between heartbeats. Specifically, it's between the RR intervals on the ECG. So it's a time between successive electrical impulses that later result in a contraction of your heart muscle. Mm-hmm. And it is believed that HRV reflects how adaptable your heart is to physical demands, but also to physiological demands. Right? So, for example, we know that if you sit for a moment and you start breathing differently, this immediately, like this de-stressing of sorts that you can experience has an immediate feedback on your HRV. And those things can be measured, right? If you're wearing an Apple Watch or you're wearing one of the wearable devices, which I'm obsessed with, that's it, right? Mm-hmm. You will be able to spot the differences between them. And I think that the device, the ring that you're wearing, actually tells you or picks up when it interprets you as being distressed and tells you, how about the short breathing exercise?
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. And so it tells you, okay, there's an issue with your HRV. How about you sit down for a moment and take a couple of deep breaths, right? It can recognize when this time between the interval between heartbeats collapses or contracts and tells you what to do instead, right? So your thinking, your relaxation will have an impact on how your body performs. The HRV is considered to be a measure of your nervous system's activity, or at least your nervous system balance, because so we have a brain and neurons and a nervous system, and they're typically divided into this, we call it the parasympathetic and sympathetic part of the nervous system. And one is your fight and flight response. The other one is the rest and digest. And they're kind of always both present. But if you have one is highly active, the other one is essentially switched off, and vice versa. You cannot be both in both states at the same time. And again, there's a reason for this. This allows us to survive, respond to high stress situation, or the other one is active when we're actually actively recovering. And a HRV generally means that the better your cardiovascular fitness is, the greater your stress resilience is, and the stronger your parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest nervous system activity is in a moment, the higher HRV you're going to have. And a lot of people use this as a proxy measure of your likelihood of living long. Mm-hmm. Because you can think about this, if you are rarely exposed to stress, if you are well trained, your cardiovascular performance is high. When you are resilient, mentally resilient, which means that the external events have little detrimental effect on what your body will produce, it is much more likely that you're going to be healthy for longer, right? That's what this means. So now, what happens when you start working with us and we start applying our methods to our clients, right? We've mentioned at the beginning that we have a complementary skill sets, which is another essential part of the method, which we can maybe cover later, right? It's not just two people the two experts that people work with. We also have a very different way of seeing the world and looking at it, which we can come back to later. But when we work with people and we start improving your habits, we will very likely be putting a basic training program for you in place because it's necessary for optimizing your brain health, right? What is good for your body is going to be good for your brain. And we start putting even very simple methods for you to increase your mental capacity, mental reserves, right? We call it cognitive reserve, cognitive capacity. You will start seeing HRV changes virtually immediately within weeks of starting the program, right? And these are sustained, because if you think about this, they kind of have to be.
Yeah.
Right? If you're improving every marker of your health, your mental resilience, your cardiovascular health, you're starting work, you start to understand that nutrition has an impact of how your body and how your mind performs. You're optimizing your glucose and sugar levels, right? This is almost like a byproduct, right? You're going to live longer, very likely, simply as a byproduct of increasing your cognitive performance.
Yeah, it definitely adds a new element, because people talk about mindset all the time, but it adds a new layer of magnitude when you understand that it's the difference between whether you're triggering your sympathetic or parasympathetic, and therefore literally the chemical composition of your body, the activation of your adrenal gland, etc., which could cause chronic disease or also longevity on the flip side. So that definitely, I think, is greater magnitude for I guess that's a bigger call to action for anyone that kind of doesn't really look too deep into how they feel.
Yeah, yes, with wearables, you have all sorts of other metrics, but humans still tend to attach themselves to things like weight and other measurements, which are important, but that's really different than showing that you can decrease your resting heart rate and have it be more conducive for restorative sleep and other things that you might do during the day while you're awake over a long period, then, how many pounds are off the scale. I mean, I think our part of our education is to try and teach people other ways of measuring their progress
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
are that can be quantitated in some way, but more just the measure of the difference from where you start, whether that is actually qualitative or quantitative. And this is one example. And I just want to say one thing about HRV too is, like you said, breathing has um, is one way to automatically slow things down
Hmm.
and bring this. It's not just awareness, but there's delivery of oxygen and clearance of CO2 from the brain in a more
Hmm.
efficient way when you are doing more intentional breathing. But that's more immediate. That's immediate, and what we're talking about is
Yeah.
long-term changes to HRV. And one way
Yeah.
to do that is, especially when we talk about the goal of brain health for longer, so that you can also enjoy a hopefully longer health span and lifespan within whatever your genetic predispositions might be, is a form of exercise called Zone 2. Have you
Hmm.
talked about Zone 2 on this podcast, Marty?
Um, Probably. I know about zone two though. I do zone two every day.
Oh, good.
Great.
Every day. Wow. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we also try to, as part of the education in someone's program, especially since a lot of people really haven't heard or tried sustaining exercise like Zone 2, and I'll define it here in a second, but the Zone 2 training is meant for life. It's for you to be able to do, like you said, every day. And when you do this every day, it seems like maybe it's probably built in now to your routine, and maybe even something you look forward to. It's not the I have to go to hit class because I'm trying to do CrossFit with my sister in the fall. Like, right, there's other things for it. We try and put these in. So zone 2 is simply the heart rate zone on a scale of perceived exertion, that keeps your heart rate elevated, but not so high that one lactate will be formed during your exercise. So, and you remain in an aerobic state.
Yep.
And not so difficult that you're also inducing cortisol response, which often happens with the more high intensity training as well. Because that's counterproductive, especially if we're trying to take care of our brains, hearts, and bodies long term. So, zone 2 training is this moderate form of training that has a proven long term impact. And not even long term. I mean, you can start seeing differences in your cognitive function, just your perceivable focus, attention, clarity, almost immediately, and then that
Yeah,
comes
just a couple
over
of times. Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Mhm. And as far as the more physiological metrics like heart rate and heart rate variability, that takes some time, but it maybe on the scale of months, depending on how often you're
Mhm.
doing this and to what extent, and making sure that you build in resistance training and rest in the appropriate way
Mhm.
as well. So that's what we mean by zone 2 training. And zone 2 for longevity is really well studied. It's not just
Yeah.
this, buzzwordy thing. It's proven. And the moderate, if you can think about what zone 2 might feel like physically for you, if you want, you could try this right now. You can go outside. You could listen to the next part of the podcast with zone 2 with no problem.
Mhm.
Um, like you're late to a meeting and you need to walk, but you can still talk and function and pay attention to your surroundings. That kind of moderate effort. Some people do this on a rowing machine. That I find is a little bit more difficult to maintain your heart rate, your target heart rate, because it's easy to, as you make physical corrections to your form, your attention on your heart rate is impacted, and that will actually cause you often a little bit of input that could be stress, and then you might be more likely to increase your heart rate over the level that we need to maintain that zone 2. So I just find that rowing is more difficult to maintain zone 2 for longer. Stationary bike is one of the best aside from the more moderate paced walking that you can do. Treadmill walking, if it's slightly on an incline, that's another way to do that. So
Yeah, it's difficult sometimes to do outside, right? I think that's why
yeah.
we're mentioning machines for purposeful training.
Mhm.
Because the most important thing in your zone 2 is to make sure you don't cross your lactate thresholds, because that's how metabolically zone 2 maintenance of zone 2 is defined. So too much becomes a problem because it undoes the benefits of sustained submetabolic threshold training, right? We're looking for what, 45 to 60 minutes during a session, ideally, right? If you can sustain it. Yeah.
So we're trying to encourage people to be as excited, if not more, with changes in their resting heart rate and HRV as what change on the scale looks like in society. Because, as you start to implement exercise into your routine, especially if you were not a regular exerciser before, like that's a huge deal. You might have lost 1, 2 pounds. It doesn't really matter, but if you're seeing that these long-term changes in your dimensions and your heart rate and all the other habit formation progress that comes with that, like that's so impactful. Be excited about that. That's what we try and help people embrace.
Yeah, because and again, we've talked resting heart rate and heart rate variability, right? But your VO2 max is going to go up, right? If you start doing this regularly, you need what? You need 6 months maybe to see a significant improvement if you're in your VO2 max. And VO2 max is one of the strongest predictor of longevity as well, right? Of you being able to remain your physical independence later in life. It's a profound thing to do. And this is just for the body, right? And then you start adding on top of this, after just a couple of sessions, reduced level of distress, significant drop in anxiety, increase in your sleep quality, sleep effectiveness rates, and essentially improving all the sleep parameters that you can have. That has to have a positive impact on your brain and on your body, right? And this is just one intervention. Right. Just one small habit.
Okay, so yes, VO2 max. I've been wondering how to increase my VO2 max. So, okay, so we've talked about zone 2 cardio, like aerobic state. Does it help getting in the what's the other ones? The anaerobic state and the phosphocreatine state, or like is zone 2 better? Should I be pushing it to increase my VO2 max? Because I think like got to do more. I don't know. To be honest, I'm a dummy with this. I've just started looking into it ever since I've been getting more into Peter Attia. So how do I increase VO2 max?
So shall I trade secrets on
Well,
on how we do this to be effective? We have an amazing thing that gives you an increase in VO2 max really, really fast. Well, really fast. That depends on the time scale, but if the fastest way you can build this.
Yeah, but first let's define VO2 max.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, just to come back to what you were saying, Marty. So V volume O2 oxygen max, so the maximum volume of oxygen that your lungs or the capacity of your lungs has to be able, right, to take in. So it's not that we need to max our body's ability to do it. There's a limit to it, and but you want to be able, it's essentially how efficiently you can deliver oxygen through your lungs.
Yes, this is your maximum uptake of oxygen during effort. So this is how many milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of your body weight per minute your body can use.
Yeah.
So you can think, so the volume of oxygen per kilogram of your body weight per minute of effort. So you can, let's say if you process the same amount of oxygen, but you weigh half of what the person next to you, right? The VO2 will be very different. So this is a composite parameter of how much oxygen your body can process at effort. Now it changes. Your maximum levels will change as you are getting older. Essentially, they will be declining from the day you were born. And they will be different for males and females. And this is so well studied that for virtually every age group, we can describe what is poor and what is excellent VO2 max. And VO2 max, because it combines your oxygen capability, right? Your ability of your lungs and body to process oxygen at effort, your weight, and the effort that you can sustain, so your fitness levels, it's a phenomenal predictor of your longevity, right? So the higher VO2 max, you are very likely to live longer. I think the gap between people who are in a top percentile of VO2 max compared to those at the bottom is massive. Like the mortality difference is multifold. I think it's more important. It's more. This gap is more significant than smoking. Like it's massive. It's a significant thing when it comes to your ability to remain healthy as you get older. And what is let's say you are, how old are you, Marty? Can I ask this publicly on a podcast?
Of course, yeah. I'm 20.
Okay, so so if you're in your 20s, you're probably on the border of the groups. So your what would be considered to be an excellent VO2 max will be in a range, it will be above 46, 47 and above. And that would place you in people with relatively excellent VO2 max. Now, because it changes as you're getting older, it declines as you're getting older. Let's say a poor VO2 max for a male who is 18, for a young adult, will be the same VO2 max would be seen as excellent or more like an elite athlete performance for someone who's 60 or older. Right? So when we are thinking or talking to people about building and maintaining their VO2 max capability, we would ideally like the people that we work with to have their VO2 max at the superior level or way above average level of a person from the age bracket younger than they are. Right? So let's say a VO2 max of 30, let's say a fair VO2 max for a 40-year-old is 35, right? It will probably place you somewhere in the middle of the band. So we would be looking for a 40-year-old to look at the 30 to 40-year group, so a bracket younger than they are. Look at what excellent would be, which would be above 45, and try to get them to that point. Because this will be the difference, Marty, when you're 75, between being able to carry groceries into your apartments and not being able to leave bed.
Holy cow.
On your own.
Yeah.
So
right?
does this have to do any at all? Because volume of the oxygen, max volume of oxygen, which would be in high intensity training. Does this have anything to do with respiratory rate?
So it's not that it's during
Not directly,
intensity. It's not that it's during high intensity. It's just a measure of what your cardiorespiratory fitness is, not the maximum amount of oxygen you need to be taking in when you are performing high intensity exercise. Just to clarify, VO2 max has nothing to do with exercise, actually.
Okay.
Like the format of exercise. It has everything to do with your cardiorespiratory fitness. Yeah. Now, respiratory rate, there can be a relationship between them, because you can imagine that if you're taking shallow, quick breaths, you're not using your lungs to be able to take in whatever maximum you could be taking in. But it's not that but that's kind of just the relationship between them. So,
think about this, Marty, as an engine in a car. Let's say you have a very heavy car with a small engine, and it simply makes it, the maximum capacity, the maximum amount of fuel the engine can burn in order to move the car, right? That would be kind of at the VO2. Again, it's a maybe not scientifically greatest comparison, but I think it should tell you how to think about this. And just because you can burn more fuel doesn't necessarily mean that you will move faster, right? You can stick the car in first gear and and try and burn a lot of fuel, but still be moving very slow, right, relatively to what you can be. So that's not the best way to think about this. I think Sarah's definition that it's an overall composite parameter of your overall cardiovascular fitness that takes into account, yes, your lung capacity, your cardiovascular performance, how well you can tolerate effort, sustain effort, right? And it takes your body weight into account as well. Again, it's a relatively composite measure. Now,
Which is why, and maybe you're about to go into this, which is why pushing into an anaerobic state or doing high intensity training or like to my knowledge, there's not any positive correlation. We're not even talking about really controlled studies. In fact, the evidence I've seen is more on the negative correlations, if any, of higher intensity training that pushes into production of phosphocreatine and VO2 max. So there's actually an inverse relationship between these from what I've seen.
yeah,
And
yes, in many studies.
Oh,
and
oh
that's
wow.
just,
Okay.
yeah.
However, so that because there's one caveat to this, right, that we need to talk about, because again, things are more complex sometimes than they seem. So let's go. Okay, so we know this is a predictor of mortality, right? And people will know, oh, I need to get my blood pressure. If my blood pressure is too high, then I'm more likely to die. If my BMI is too high, I'm more likely to die early. If my cholesterol is too high, I'm more likely to this, right? Now, VO2 max as a single measurement is better than the measurement of cholesterol level in predicting your mortality, better than BMI, better than blood pressure. Hell, it's better than all of them combined, right? I can predict how fit or how likely you are not to be with us within the next decade by looking at your VO2 max with more precision than I would be by taking all the other blood tests combined, just looking at this one thing. And as Sarah said, the high intensity interval training, for example, or high intensity training momentarily is not necessarily a good thing for your body. It adds a lot of distress. It creates this cortisol, adrenaline mediated response temporarily. But if you think about increasing or maximizing your VO2 max, you should be considering high intensity training in your training regimen as well, if you want to maximize it or raise it as fast as you can, because there are other benefits of high intensity training beyond the momentary stress that it puts on your body. So I encourage people to think about like this. If you want to, it's like a stretching a point into a square, right? You want to be expanding it on one axis and another. And I think so, both on your X and on your Y, right? And the bigger the area of the square, that would be the higher VO2 max. And those two dimensions that you want to extend one is increasing the amount of zone 2 training that you do. That's by far the most important one. But the other parameter that you want to keep increasing is your peak cardiovascular performance, because that will add to your VO2 max, right? So it's kind of like a multiplier.
But you need both. Yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of need both to make it the fastest. However, we do recommend doing this at the very specific ratio of one to another. We recommend the ratio of roughly 1 to 10. So for every 10 hours of zone 2 training, we would recommend an hour of high intensity training. So for example, if you would be doing a zone 2 training 5 days a week, that would be 5 hours. Then if you want to maximize your results quickly, then you would add 30 minutes of high intensity training once per week.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So
yeah, and we've seen that this gives you the results that you're looking for in the shortest amount of time. And again, that's what we're obsessed with. We want to see the maximum impact with minimum effort. That's what our system is, right?
All right, you guys are teaching me a lot of great stuff. I'm really freaked out now. Right after this, I'm gonna check my My VO2
I was
max is
going to
at.
ask if you know what it is from the ring. Does it tell you?
Oh boy. I can check right now.
Oh.
Yeah, data is good, right? It's more reliable than recall.
Oh yeah. Let me see. VO2 max. Oh no, yeah, VO2 max. What would it be in? Uh, would it be an average HRV? No.
No,
Mhm.
no, that would be a separate. So typically to measure VO2 max, you would need to be in a special cabin connected to a machine that measures the intake of air into your lungs. It can be estimated using tech. I mean, there's some smartwatches that can estimate your VO2 max during exercise,
Okay.
but that's a proxy.
Hmm.
And also the other thing is with VO2 max, it's something that takes time to increase. So it's not going to happen if you go to the gym every day for a month,
Hmm.
right? We're looking at, again, that's where we talk about sustainable habits, right? And the importance of the brain, your place, because VO2 max, it's a long-term game.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
you okay, I might be about to get dumb here, but could you just simply increase it by like changing your posture so you can get bigger breaths? Because it's volume.
No,
No.
no.
No,
I mean, there'll be
no.
people trying to convince you to that, but the short answer is no.
Okay.
Though there's no reason not to optimize your posture at any
Yes.
given moment.
Yeah. So optimizing your posture may help you with breathing in general.
Hmm.
So, right, for example, if imagine that you are running, but you're only taking half of the breath, right? You're only filling your lungs halfway through. I mean,
Hmm.
of course, you're not going to maximize your performance during the run,
Yeah.
right? So the posture has or restrictions in your breathing will have an impact of how much oxygen you can process, but not because your engine, let's say cardiovascular engine, is not good enough. You're simply not pouring enough fuel into it to go faster,
Hmm.
Hmm.
right? But it's not the case that when you change your posture, your VO2 max will go up. No, the VO2 max is already the maximum your engine can do. If you're not giving it enough oxygen, right, it's not going to work. In the same way, like if I would tell you the opposite, that you put a straw in your mouth and, close your nose and try breathing through a straw and go for a run, right, you're probably not going to do really well, right? But it's not because your VO2 max has changed. You're simply not providing yourself with enough oxygen, right? There's a restriction on the way, but the size of the
Oh,
engine hasn't changed, right?
okay.
Yeah.
I see. And the engine here is
Your lungs.
Your
your lungs.
your lungs and heart,
Got it.
lungs and
Yeah.
heart. Yeah.
I see. I see. So then, all right. So what? So, okay. I get
Hmm.
it.
I think the key message here is if you are measuring your overall fitness with things like with just weight or blood pressure, that's not that's not it.
Yeah,
Not
not good enough. Yeah.
not only is it not good enough, it's in some ways not really telling you the whole story. And no individual measurement does. But because of the way that VO2 max increases, because of the types of physical interventions you're helping your body, it gives a much more broader view, like you said, on your overall fitness and your likelihood to live longer.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I think, Mark, that's important for all your listeners to know.
Hmm.
From the age of 20, if you are not exercising, your VO2 max will be declining by 10% with each decade,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That's just the fact of it. There's no escaping it. And actually, for females, that's the rate is slightly lower, but also their overall size of the engine is smaller than it is in males as well. Males have higher VO2 max in the same age group than females. So that's something to think about as well. And the habits. So the thing is, because it keeps declining, you reach certain peak relatively early on in life, and if you're not maintaining it or improving it, it's just gonna it's just a slope. It's just going down and down and down, and it goes down faster the older you get. So if you didn't build sufficient amount of elite, let's say, fitness early on in life, and I mean like top probably 1% of elite performers, then if you really want to be healthy later in life, you probably should start exercising like today, right? There's just no getting, there's no way to get around that. And here there's more, right? Because that's, again, this is Sarah's expertise when it comes to physical performance, but it's exactly the same thing with your brain.
Yeah.
Your cognitive ability declines with every year, roughly from the age of 25, unless you are maintaining it. So you're putting a conscious effort to build and maintain it. And the more you have achieved or learned, or the more the more you've built before the decline starts, of course, the better, right? But you can slow both. You can slow the rate of the decline, and you can catch up on these things, but you probably don't want to wait too late. It's like with braking before a red light, right? Both when it comes to your physical and your mental performance, right? If you start braking long before the red light, it's not going to be difficult. It's going to be smooth and nice and easy, right? But if you missed, right, you haven't seen the light, and now you suddenly need to start braking, when you're 70, it will be rough, right? You can still do this if you're lucky, but it's going to be rough, right?
So
the
how
longer
does
you
that
wait,
look like then? How does the last minute break look like in someone's life?
well, it's go
Well,
ahead, Sarah.
it doesn't often, right? I mean, that's the reality is the last minute break puts you in the middle of the intersection, typically.
It's getting dark, man. Okay.
Well, but it's also real.
Yeah,
right?
no, it's real.
Yeah,
People got to know.
It's also real, right?
But
We
the other-
might not
Gotta
like
know.
it.
But the other thing is someone will say, well, if I would have known the light was going to turn red, I would have braked sooner. Well, every time you come to a stoplight, you kind of have to assume that at some point it's going to turn red, right? So, the reality of being human and is that it is going to turn red. It's up to you to proactively be prepared for when it does. Yeah.
That's it. You want to buy yourself time. Essentially,
Yeah.
that's what Sarah is trying to say, right? Because certain things, again, remember how we talked about the inevitable reality of life? This is one of them, right? We're not going to live forever, whether we like it or not, right? But we can do a lot to extend both the lifespan, so how long we live, and also the health span, so how long we can enjoy the life that we have, right? How long we remain cognitively and physically independent. And you cannot change the outcome, but you can significantly impact everything that happens between today and that day.
Yeah.
And the thing is, yeah. And you get benefits immediately, right? When it comes to zone 2 training, a couple of sessions, you already start to feel better, like immediately, right? And it's the same thing with cognitive performance training. You start getting benefits right away. You don't have to wait until you're 70 to start seeing benefits. It's just going to be easy when you're 70. And you're independent and you're fit and you can think and you can walk and run and do all the activities you wanted to do. And a lot of us will have parents, right? And or grandparents. And you'll be able to see, and a lot of people, this simply happens randomly. It's rarely proactive, unfortunately. But 2 people who are at the age of 75 can be physically and mentally in a completely different place. So the question is, where do you want to be? And what is it worth to you, right? The one thing that we have learned with the clients is that, when we ask someone who is 60, what would you give away to be able to be 40 again? What do you think the answer is? Almost always.
You ask people who are 75, what's the one thing you would give away to be 40 again?
No, not one thing. What would you give away? What would you give? What would you sacrifice? What would you give that you have accumulated, whatever that is, to be 40 or to be 30 again?
Well, like all their money or something like that?
That's
Other
pretty
way.
much every single person says pretty much the same thing. I would give everything.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so
Jeez.
you'll never be healthier and fitter than you are today, right? This is as good as it gets, right? So, well, that's what it is. But realizing this allows you to say, okay, how do I maintain this?
Yeah.
What do I need to do? How do I, if I want to start a business when I'm 30, and I hope I still be running this when I'm 60, how do I stay competitive?
Yeah.
If I want to retire at 65, how do I make sure I can actually enjoy the holidays I've been saving for my entire life, right? Or whatever the thing might be. Just think about this,
Yeah.
right? It's worth, like, you're in your 30s right now, in your 40s right now, and I can guarantee that 30 years from now you would say, I would give everything away to be where I am right now.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be, right? Just play it smart, and again, all the tools are there, and
Yeah.
people to help you as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This, the way you're talking about it, it's very, very inspiring. It's very, well, it's really motivating out of fear, but it's like real, but it's real. It's fear of a real thing. I think your guys' marketing probably needs less good, like, inspirational thing, more fear mongering. This is the stuff that's getting me, at least. You guys got to fear monger your clients, man. But it's real. I think people should be afraid of this, man. I'm happy that I'm afraid of it because that's freaky. Like that analogy is perfect. Seeing the red light too late, and then you're in the intersection.
Mm. But here's the thing. I don't believe that you need to be afraid. I think that you should simply be at peace with the reality, because certain things are inevitable. Because once you stop being fearful, this is where the real motivation comes in. Fear is an emotion. It's a learned emotion.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you, and again, this comes from, right, Sarah, from our mind method. If you do anything because of what you feel in the moment, it's neither a good decision, neither a good motivator, and it's not going to last.
Yeah.
Because emotions do not exist in objective reality. Emotions only exist inside of you, right? As we talked with the roller coaster, two people will have different emotions in response to the same situation and event. Right? So you don't want your motivation, you don't want your why to be based on what you feel in the moment. Regardless whether this feeling is fear or joy or anything else, that's simply not going to last.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't believe in fear-mongering. Actually, quite the opposite. We help people how to get rid of the fears that they hold, whether this is fear, any type of fear. And we later teach them as well how to operationalize it, or how to weaponize it. So how to use, if you already feel it, not only how to stop letting fear govern your life and your decisions, but also how to turn it into your ally.
Yeah.
Right? This is part of what we help people do.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, actually, because that same fear about cognitive decline, physical decline, yes, it can whip some people in shape, like Brian Johnson, or you guys know Brian Johnson, right? But I think for most people, it goes more like deeper than that, and it's just like rejecting it altogether. It's like, I'm gonna live for now. You know what I mean? Like it's making your immortality project something symbolic,
Well, that's also often out of fear
Yeah,
too,
exactly. Yeah.
right? It's just another approach. But I think, yeah, I think it's like you said, fear is an emotion.
And it's not a good, it's not, emotions are not good.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing for making any decisions or changes. Marty, let me ask you the question then. If you're afraid, let's say if somebody's afraid of dogs, right? And there's a very aggressive or big dog in the neighborhood, what are you going to do if you're afraid of it?
If there's a big dog in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be a Karen and like call the town service. Like, there's a big dog. I don't know if that's over the regulation for the size of dogs. I'm not going to be a Karen. I'm probably going to just not go around that house very
That's it.
often.
Right.
That's it. You're going to avoid it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's
Because
a good one.
the intuitive
Yeah, exactly.
the fear is a survival mechanism. It
Yeah.
helps you avoid things that potentially going to get you in trouble. So
Yeah.
if I want to put you at peace with inevitable reality of our aging,
You're just going to avoid
which
it.
is what it is,
You're just going
you
to
don't
avoid
want to
it.
be avoiding the things that you
And you
should
don't
be
want to
doing.
avoid it. Yeah, exactly.
We don't like fear. We want to approach it in a
Yeah,
very different way. Yeah.
exactly. Because, yeah, I think maybe the difference between the Brian Johnsons and, well, I guess, everyday people who would rather not think about death every day is like he's afraid of it enough to still like face it, but still like treat it as an enemy and like try to not die. But then like most people, I think it's like they're so afraid of death that they just completely reject it all. They just reject thinking about our that
Immortality
yeah,
and
that we're a body, immortality at all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like repress any thoughts of our biological nature, that we're just gonna, we
Yeah.
come out in between a bladder and an anus, and we're gonna end up in with worms eating us and stuff. I don't think people want to think about that. It's all everything's just a big rejection of that. But you got to accept it so you can do
Experience.
something about it, so you can
Yeah.
see the
That's it.
worms later, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, that's welcome to the mirror, right?
Hmm.
oh, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's the mirror.
That's where we start. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't forget, not everyone is afraid of death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is something that we do a lot of fear work. And yeah, we work on foundational fears as well, which is something that all humans have. Most of them don't realize what they are. And they can govern your life, right? They can make you avoid things that you need to be doing. And you might never, if you never look at yourself closely in a mirror, you might never understand what is it that makes you do or not do certain things that you need to be doing for yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, because it is a powerful motivator, but it's a powerful motivator to avoid
Yes.
doing things. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, okay. Let's end it sort of with that. That's really great stuff. So we got practical tips for increasing these vital real like actually vital, right? People use vital as like like
Yeah.
metaphorically, this is actually vital to
Yeah.
increase these vital metrics of VO2 max. And what was the other one? HRV is also nice, but VO2 max being the best one. Um, and okay, so let's wrap it all together just before we end up here. What can the average person do right now, this week, this month, this year? What are the things we should be doing to increase the
Your
quality?
cognitive.
Yeah,
Hmm.
the quality of our cognitive, our
Hmm.
longevity, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm. Well, at the end of the day, we're all the average person. So that's one. Two is like that thing that you have in like the Rolls Royce that you have up here needs not corn syrup and scrolling and too much information.
Hmm.
So, like putting your brain and your own curiosity about how it's working for you or what it's trying to tell you is one thing. I think just treat your brain like you would treat your body and treat it with care and respect because it doesn't matter whether you want to live long or not, you want to live well, right? So that's one thing. I think just in general, people's understanding and appreciation of their minds is it is
Hmm.
difficult, of course, of course now, but like do less and bring your curiosity back to how your mind really works. And you can start doing that right now, every day,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
We talked about the specific things you can do for your health, short and long term, um, which is to move and
Mm,
sleep and eat well.
mm,
There's lots of other science we could share about that, of course, but nothing we're saying is really new
mm,
or complicated. It's go back to the basics and put the
Mhm.
simple things into practice.
Yes, because I think, Sarah, I think this is very profound because we often work with people that need to optimize the last 20%, right? Because they want to be, again, they want to be better than everyone else, outcompete, outthink, outsmart, and so on, right? That's true. But for the vast majority of us, when we get the basics right, like we're 80% there. And Sarah said what they are, right? And what is good for your brain is good for your body, right? Diet, you understand how important it is that what you eat will impact how your body functions. It's also the thing for your brain. But the diet for your brain is not necessarily just the food, it's also the information that you let in. Right. So that's
mm,
the information diet that we're talking about. Diet for your body and then diet for your brain.
mm,
Movement, same thing, right? It's important for your body because we talked about how connected they are, how one influences the other. We talked about importance of environment and importance of habits and importance of rest. If I think for most people who are just beginning on their journey or never paid attention to it, my one thing, if there's one thing that you're going to do, I would say put everything away, sit down for 5 minutes with yourself and wait to
mm.
see what happens. We find it very sometimes scary, I would say, or or at least interesting to see how difficult it is for many people today to spend 10 minutes doing nothing.
Mm.
And we also know from
Mhm.
how your brain works that your brain needs more time doing nothing than processing information.
Mm.
And most of us process
Yeah.
information 100% of our waking time,
Mm.
right? The ratio should be 10% processing, 90% rest.
Mhm.
At the moment, we do 100% processing, 0% rest.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
change, any improvement here will be a massive advantage.
Yeah. And then I guess lastly, and then how can, just because of the nature of this podcast, it's a health tech podcast, world's first ever health tech podcast. How can people use technology, wearables, whatever, to help them with this or prevent technology from hurting them? Like you said,
Mhm,
with information, like you got any tips with that? Health
mhm.
tech?
Yes. So Marty, can I respond with a question?
Yeah.
You probably know, and the listeners will know, that if you're not losing your muscles, right, you never lifted anything, you're gonna struggle. Now, what do you think that the frequent use of technology does to your brain when you no longer need to think, calculate, analyze, look at, the orient yourself in the world,
Mm.
think independently, search and synthesize information, so on and so on and so. What do you think that the popular use of technology will do to your brain muscle?
Turns to bush, right?
Yeah, it's just not used, right?
Yeah.
If you outsource all the thinking to the device in your hand, probably not going to be great.
Mm.
Now, but let's talk about that it doesn't mean that technology shouldn't be used. It's quite the contrary, right? We have this could be seen as an expansion or extension of your brain,
Mm.
but the use of technology shouldn't be coming at the cost of your brain.
Mm.
So there's a big difference, for example, in using generative AI or large language models to help you polish out your draft, right, or book, and having it make it up for you,
Mm.
right? Forget the quality of that, because if you know how those technologies work, you'll understand that all you're going to get is an average of what is most frequently found on the internet. not necessarily anything that is new, tailored, specific, breakthrough, relevant, or important, right?
Mhm.
If you'll be lucky enough for the model not to make stuff up for you,
Mhm.
right? But it looks and sounds convincing. There's a big difference in how we can use the technology to our benefit to speed up, the things that we do to be an extension of our brain rather than a replacement for our brain. Wearables, we talked about. I'm a huge fan because we believe in data and evidence, and we like to collect evidence and data about ourselves and also about the people we work with. We encourage people to do this. It's not for everyone. Some people are overwhelmed with information that they get or the interpretation of it. It's not for everyone, but it's a valuable source of information. I see that a lot of future of healthcare relying increasingly more on technology as well.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear on this podcast. So that's nice. All right, this was a really really awesome conversation. It got deep, a little dark too at some times. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is normal for you, man. I don't think about death too much. I'm like, whoa, whoa, geez. But no, but it's useful, man. You got to stay active to not, go out, you know, in a wheelchair, kind of just stuck there. Some of them
Mhm.
just got that face, they're stuck there
That's right.
like all the time. It's
But
like
it's
messed up. I'm just like, oh, I don't want that to happen to me,
almost all of it is preventable. The
Yeah,
there are some things you can never predict that might happen to you, and that's just life.
yeah,
But a lot of morbidity and mortality is preventable.
yeah,
The majority of it, right?
yeah.
So it means that it's not. It means there's something you can do about this,
Hmm.
and it's really not that hard. Like it's a lot of those interventions, right? So like, and again, especially if you know how to do and what to do to minimum effort with maximum impact. That's where you want to be.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. For the viewers, stay doing zone 2. Stay doing nothing from time to time, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Information
And
diet, yeah.
yep, and stay super human. Peace. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.